Hello, friends. It's a privilege and honor, of course, to always be with you. I was invited to reflect a little bit on faith, fear, and love, is how I sort of interpreted it. And I often think that fear continues to provide a barrier to our faith and love, how we can be present with one another, how we can walk alongside each other, how we can be fully present and, if I'm honest, fully human with one another. I think sometimes we allow ourselves to get so trapped in our minds, so trapped in our thoughts, that we don't allow ourselves to fully show up to encounter the other. The other person who might be a person who is so different from us, but even sometimes people who are so similar to us, we still have a barrier of engagement, a barrier of connection because of fear. I want to share a couple of stories of my experience when we've allowed this sense of fear to become a barrier to love. As many of you may be aware, I was serving as an associate conference minister in the Nebraska Conference of the United Church of Christ. And I was serving in that context in the middle of the reality of George Floyd's murder. And so there were protests all over this country, and particularly there were even protests in Omaha, Nebraska, where I was living. I lived in a central part of the city, really near a main artery in Omaha. And from my house, I could hear chanting, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. And I could hear the helicopters. And on the news, I saw that all the news media was gathered. And I mean, there were hundreds, if not at least 1,000 people gathered on the streets of Omaha to declare that Black lives indeed mattered. So I got my own self dressed and I had my mask on and I got my little grandmother's dog who lives with me. And I was marching myself just a few blocks away from my house to be a part of history, to be a part of this protest, to be a part of this social activism. When I arrived, I noted, now I will tell you, I was living in Nebraska, that almost every person who was out protesting was white. There wasn't really a person of color in the immediate vicinity of where I was. When I arrived at the protest, as I told you, I heard those words, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. I was out there at the protest and rally for over 2 hours, and not one of my white siblings said a word to me. Not one said hello, not one engaged, not one really even acknowledged I was there. Now, my grandmother's dog, many people stopped and they pet her and they played with her, but there was no acknowledgement of the Black life that these folks were declaring mattered. When I reflect on that, the fear of encounter, the fear of how to connect with each other. For my siblings in that moment, Black lives did indeed matter here, but Black lives hadn't learned to matter here. Because, see, here was this Black person who was in the midst, who's physically and tangibly present, and yet the fear of encountering, the fear of the other, the fear of how we are all human together prevented even a simple hello. Now, maybe people didn't want to make me uncomfortable, or maybe they didn't want to have the right words. I can come up with all of these other perfectly logical explanations, but I want to say it is the fear of how we show up with each other that was, again, the barrier for the loving act. When I reflect on that day, the thing that would have been most powerful to me, and I fantasize about it sometimes, is if I had walked from my house in Omaha, Nebraska, into the middle of a sea of my white siblings who were chanting that my life mattered, that if they somehow turned inward, or even if one, I mean, the dramatic part is if they all turned inward and let me know your life matters. I mean, I just think I would have been the most filled that I could have ever been in my life. But even if one person had taken the moment to acknowledge my presence, to say hello, to say, I see you, to say, your life matters. You are my sibling. You are another human being connected to me. It would have been just as powerful as if the whole group did it. So we have to think about, where are we allowing our sense of barrier? Where are we allowing our discomfort, which is often rooted in fear, to prevent us from showing love? Love that transforms us, love that breaks us open, love that helps us to see God in a more fully and more beautiful way. So I hope this helps in the midst of your conversation of how fear can sometimes be a barrier and a block to how we love. God bless you.